Reddit, what's your most embarrassing doctor's office story? I'll start. Mine's not so much embarrassing as it is awesome. I had the mumps during my first year of college, and along with that I got orchitis, swelling of the testicles caused by the mumps, in my left nut, which swelled up to the size of a potato. It was really painful and heavy, so I had to carry it everywhere for a while. So I went to the doctor's. He checked my mumps and then I told him there was another problem. I dropped Tro, lay on the doctor bed thing, and he came over to examine. He laughed when he seen it, cause it was freaking huge, and said what seems to be the problem. Jokingly, it was at that moment that I pointed to my regular size bollock and said this one shrank. Cue 5-minute laughter fit from the doc. I had to go to a specialist urologist due to pain in my ding dong. My wife, who is awesome, accompanied me for support. The doc was at a teaching hospital, so he asked if a couple of med students could observe the exam. I say okay, my dignity was already at a new low anyway, so why not? I dropped Tro and the doc starts yanking and pulling on mini-me. He takes some notes and then directs the two med students to cop a feel right where he did. I happen to look over at my wife, who is trying to stifle a smile while watching three dudes essentially whack me off. TLDR. My insurance paid for the most awkward handy in the history of time, while my wife watched. Ha he ding dong. When I turned 30, I suddenly became a hypochondriac. I thought that everything was cancer, or worse, so I'm seeing my doctor, who was a racquetball buddy, for an annual physical, and I mentioned that I was having some pains in the left side of my chest. I asked him, I know this is rare, but could it be breast cancer? I'm male BTW. He felt around seriously then, with an absolutely straight face, asked me, does the pain hurt worse when you have your period? That was pretty much the end of my year of hypochondria. This actually occurred shortly after I was born, and we refer to it as the Green Pea Incident. My brother, 2 years old, was moving to solid foods, and absolutely loved peas. Mushed, boiled, fried, or in things. He loved them. One day, my mom noticed that my brother wasn't going to the washroom. No big deal, she thought. It's only been a day. 2 days later, nothing's coming out. He kept eating and eating, like the happy little fat toddler he was, eating all amounts of peas. My parents scheduled a day off work and took him to the doctor together. The doctor, of course, says that he must be constipated. It happens to the best of us. At this point, it's been 4 days since the little crap has taken one. The doctor gives him a large dose of prescription strength X-Lax and suggests that they should probably keep an eye on him for the next while. As he's talking to my parents about what they should do, my brother starts to crap. Bright, neon green crap. He had eaten so many peas that the fiber had actually clogged him up, and now it was returning in force. The semi-liquidated crap started flying out, faster and faster, like you see in those comedy movies. Eventually, it settled down to a light stream, but not before his crap mist had covered the entire wall next to the examination table. Neon green crap mist, all over the doctor's tools, his blood pressure stuff and his posters. It ruined the cushion on the table, and stank to high heck. My parents never went back to that doctor again. TL. Doctor, neon green crap mist. I'd think after such a performance you'd be obligated to give that doctor your business for the rest of your life. A friend of mine mistakenly called her gynecologist instead of her dentist to make an appointment, and started the call by admitting she was overdue for a cleaning. Recent story. When I was brought up from being under anesthesia after getting my wisdom teeth out, and before my transportation back home arrived, I recovered enough to unplug my IV and various sensor doodads and wandered into the waiting area asking for a BJ. The nurse promptly gathered me back into my room, and I recall complaining that someone might have said yes and I deserve the right to know. I remember my GF and doctor laughing at me in the recovery room. I thought I was being completely logical, and I still don't know what I was saying. This story makes me not want to know now. My dad was getting his prostate checked out by this pretty good looking female urologist. She had to insert a catheter since my dad was having trouble peeing. Anyway, she removes the catheter once they're done and my dad starts pee all over the doctor's leg. She took it like a champ and told him, if I don't get peed on at least once a day, my husband will suspect I'm ditching work to have an affair, or something like that. Quickly now, pee on my leg and he won't suspect a thing. When I was newly pregnant with my daughter, I was at my OB's office for a pelvic exam. After I stirrup up, my doc is knuckle deep in my vag and says, "Oh, you'll be fine if you have a big baby. There's plenty of room in here." I'm sure she meant that I have a wide pelvic arch and would have no trouble with a normal delivery. But what I heard was, "Wow, I see dozens of these every day, but you have a huge, gaping T." One day I was visiting a new doctor and he asked me to remove my pants. I obliged, knowing that he'd probably check me for a hernia and make sure I didn't have a third ball or something. I had forgotten that the night before I had shaved off exactly one half of my pubic hair. As my brain started to panic and he begins fiddling around, the doctor looks up at me and says, "It's easy to start, but it's hard to finish, isn't it?" While cauterizing the hole during my vasectomy, my skin smoked more than it should have, set off the fire alarm, and I ended up with numerous people of numerous career choices in the room with my exposed nutsack. Should have said your dong was the new poop. When my wife was in the final stages of labor, it seemed to be taking forever. I slipped out of the birthing suite to get some fresh air and make a couple of phone calls. They made me turn my cell off inside. A nurse came running out and said to me, "Quick, come back. It's all happening." And they rushed me into a room where I was confronted with a huge hairy pea from which a beautiful bushy, dark-haired Mexican baby literally fired out of the birth canal like a rocket. I am going WTF when the doctor hands me scissors to cut the umbilical cord. Well, that was fun, I thought, as I discreetly slipped out and into the next room, where my wife was still hours away from producing. What? So I used to always get pilonidal cysts when I was in high school. From between 13 to 18 I had it 5 times, which according to my doctor is a lot. These things used to hurt bad. I'd get them right above my tailbone and it would feel like the tailbone was broken. If I didn't get it dealt with right away, I wouldn't be able to walk from the pain. The last time I ever got one was horrible. It was Halloween and I was at my friend's house when I noticed it starting to hurt. I knew right away what it was. The next morning I had my mom take me to the doctor office, but because it was a Saturday my family doctor's office was closed, so we ended up going to a walk-in clinic. The doctor took a quick look at it, said it wasn't the problem, and set me up for an x-ray. By the time the x-ray was over, it was hurting beyond anything I could imagine. It felt exactly like one of the cysts, but I trusted the doctor's word. Later that evening the pain was so severe I had to go to emergency. At the hospital, the doctor there took another quick look at it and told me it was nothing. He prescribed me some pain medication and sent me on my way. That night was horrible. I was terrified. I thought there was something severely wrong with me. I thought I cracked my tailbone after I fell over a balloon at my friend's house or something. On Monday, after a weekend of intense pain, I could finally go see my family doctor. I remember the waiting room being filled with people. It hurt too much to sit, so I stood in the corner with my back bent weird because it hurt too much to stand straight. All of a sudden, I felt instant relief, followed by a smell that was quite honestly the worst smell I ever smelled in my entire life. Even to this day, it smelled like death. The people around me could smell it too. Everyone started coughing, but trying their best not to offend. I could feel my pants were completely wet with the pus of my cyst. When my name was called I was so embarrassed. Everyone knew the smell was coming from me, and now they could see my drenched clothing. I mean, it was like I had just dipped the top of my pants and the bottom of my shirt in water. That's how wet they were. The faces of the people were that of utter shock. They must have thought I pee myself. Later in the doctor's office, the doctor took one step inside the room and said, another cyst. He knew just from the smell what it was. He took a look and said it was the biggest one he had ever seen. He signed me up for surgery. Before I just gotten little surges just for him to pop for cyst. Not a surgeon was going to remove the skin around the area so it would never return, and I have never had one since. Not me, but when I was in the waiting room of the hospital for a broken toe, I saw a somewhat elderly man, 50s 60s, come up to the nurse's desk and cough quietly. She waved him off as a sign to tell him to wait a minute and he started to pace nervously. He was able to catch a male nurse walking by and tried to discreetly tell him he needed immediate medical attention. I was wondering why the guy was so antsy, and that's when I noticed it. The guy had a mixture of brown and red fluid leak down the back of his thigh from his shorts. The male nurse asked him to speak up, and even though he was quiet, I heard him mutter, "I've got a corn cob so far up my butt that I can't reach it, and I don't want the entire dang hospital to know about it." The male nurse seemed to hesitate a bit and motioned him to wait in an isolated room. TLDR. Older gentleman had a dildo shoved too far up his butt and started leaking on the floor. And that, kids, is why you always use flared bases. I had a pay the bills job as an administrator at a private hospital. We had an urgent referral come in for a testicular ultrasound, and the guy whose testicles needed to be checked was quite a famous actor and was performing in a play in town, so the schedule for booking him in was really tough going. So I was skipping through the next 2-3 days of appointment calendars looking for a free 10-minute slot, or a before lunch slot that was filled but likely to run short, so there'd be time to speed him in and out. He was on the phone while I was trying to book him in, and I got so self-conscious at the long silence after explaining the normal waiting times and what I was doing that I said, all cheery like, "Don't worry, we'll squeeze your balls in here somewhere." I made sure not to be near the reception desk when he came in. On New Year's Eve 2001, I woke up with an unbearable pain in my left side of my abdomen. I couldn't move for over an hour. I was at home from my sophomore year of college, but none of my family was home. After about 3 hours of crying and doubled over in pain in bed, I crawled across the house and called my mom at work. She took me to the OR where they did various pressure tests and listening and decided it wasn't my appendix, so they did some x-rays. The only other person in the OR was an old lady that had a cut on her head, and she was trying to comfort me while my face was red and I was holding back tears. The doctor came in and looked at the lady and looked at me and whispered, "I don't know how to tell you this, but your colon is full of crap." Actual term. I screamed, "That's it. Get it out of me," and he told me he could give me an enema, a suppository, or a salty drink. I took the drink and shat for 8 hours straight. I was good enough to go to a party that night but still had the shoots and didn't get drunk. Felt so much better. TL. Doctor thought my appendix was rupturing. A doctor told me I was full of crap. So the next time someone tells me I'm full of crap, I'll reply with, "That's it. Get it out of me." After a rough night of praying to the porcelain goddess aka puking my guts out, I discovered that most of the blood vessels in one eye had burst. The end result was red where normally the eye is white, so I looked creepy as heck. Nephew told me I looked like Voldemort. Wife insisted I go to the doctor to get it checked out, so I did. Got a random lady doctor. She took one look at it and asked, "So are you into kinky fricking?" To which I replied, "No, not really." Her response, "Well, you should be careful with that choking stuff. It can be dangerous." I laughed nervously. The nurse kept staring at the floor, and I proceeded to explain that I had been vomiting all night. Even as I left, she said, "Well, just be more careful next time." Oh yeah, best part. This was in Provo, Utah, 99% Mormon and apparently home of kinky strangling fricking. Was getting a physical a few years ago so I could play HS football. Usually the doctor feels around your abdomen and that's that. This time the doctor made me strip and made me cough. I hadn't fapped in a few days with the combination of a stranger's hand on my beans gave me a semi which I tried to cover, which led me to accidentally fart on him as I turned around. Doc looked at me and said, "You can play," and left. The story just gets better and better. I was 10. Went to the OR with a ruptured appendix. They had trouble diagnosing my problem and sent me in for an enema. The doctor was doing his thing. Me, "You must be the least popular doctor in the hospital. Doc, I don't get many thank you cards." I hope you sent the doctor an appropriately themed thank you card. I recently had a sore throat, and when trying to get a good look at it in the mirror, I noticed these large, pink spots all over the very back of my tongue. I spent a week fretting over it, wondering what they were and why they weren't going away, until my mom got worried enough about them that she went with me to my doctor. Upon examining my throat and tongue, he pronounced that what I was seeing were my taste buds. I have never seen my doctor, who is an incredibly stoic man, smile so wide before. My family is never going to let me live it down. Technically your mother didn't know what they were either, so she can't give you too tough a time. Semicolon. Went to the doctor when I was about 8 months pregnant. At that point in my pregnancy I was very gassy, and if I tried to hold it in it would get painful after a while. While I was sitting in the doctor's office I felt like I had to fart. I held it in for a while thinking that if I did fart the doctor would be in at any moment. 15 minutes passed and nothing. So I decided to let it go. The tiniest little fart ever, but it stunk like something crawled up my butt and died. 30 seconds later the doctor walked in and asked me what that smell was. Just about everything that happens during pregnancy is embarrassing. Had nasal polyps removed. When there are a crap ton. After the procedure there are several follow-ups to get minor stragglers, but mostly also to remove giant blood clots that have formed. My otolaryngologist is busy digging and scraping and scooping, and some monster fricking aliens are being dragged out. I can see my nostrils expanding like I'm passing a chicken egg-sized baby out of them. Then they shloop shut again. Anyway, he's grinding and yanking at this one and it won't come loose. He rotates it a bit, gently places it in a tray, and says nothing but leaves the room with a half smile. 3 minutes later he comes back and tells us he had a silent freak out and had to wash up because a giant bloody string of snot carried elasticity from the pool and slapped up against the length of his cheek like a cheap 25-cent toy from the bins at the front of a Kmart. Getting my very first pelvic exam. First, the doctor was so nervous, she dropped the first speculum getting it out of the package. Hands shaking and everything. Okay, I'm on the table, speculum inside me, doctor and nurse hanging out around my lady bits. I'm trying to pretend that I'm not here when the doctor goes, "Are you on your period? Number Y, Komaru." In her nervousness, she'd been way too rough and made me bleed. "Thanks doc." I whimpered and crossed my legs. I'm going to tell a friend's story, since I don't have any embarrassing stories of my own. Cough. About 10 years ago, I had a very promiscuous friend. He would sleep with anything warm, wet and willing, and half the time didn't use any protection. One day he started having a burning sensation when he peed, more than your average UT. He'd had ripped new random a few days ago, so he went to the doctor's office to have some tests run. 2 days later the doc's office calls him and says that he needs to come in immediately. He rushes to the doc's office, gets sent to an exam room, and the doc comes in with a clipboard and a very concerned look on his face. "Well, about that burning sensation." My friend is nervous and says, "Yeah, doc, you work at a restaurant?" Friend, "Yep." "Doc, you drink a lot of soda?" Friend, "Yep." "Doc, something citrusy, like Sprite or Sunkist?" Friend, "Yep." "Doc, the burning sensation when you pee is excess carbonic acid in your system being eliminated. Cut out the soda and stick to water and you'll be fine in a couple of days." Friend, "Why do you have to call me down here to tell me that, doc?" "Doc, so you'd stop having unprotected fricking sessions." Awesome doctor. Massive hemorrhoids. Went into the doctor and he had to stuff my anus back into my anus. Had to lay on my side for 3 days. I was having a lump on my balls checked. I described said lump to the doctor and he went about trying to locate it himself. I was lying down at a stage staring at the ceiling. After about a minute of him fumbling he admitted defeat and asked me to find it. So I sat up and started to jumble them around in my hands. I was hunched over and he wasn't more than a foot away staring intently at my balls when suddenly a gust of wind blew the door wide open. Just then a nurse walked past the door. That was awkward eye contact. Oh, and before I let you go, do you have an active physical relationship? Number. I thought so. I had to go to the doctor today, as it happens, and a nurse was kinda flirty with me. So, happy ending kinda. During a genital hernia check when I was 12, I ejaculated on my doctor's shoulder when my junk was being touched. Boom, shoulder shot. When I was in high school I had to get blood drawn and I do not like needles. I went in, got my blood drawn, paid and started to walk out. I got to my car and realized I didn't have a note to get my absence excused, so I went in and got in line to get one. I was standing in line and started to sweat and get cold and started to get really dizzy. All of a sudden I started to have tunnel vision and stumbled into this lady that must have weighed 350 pounds and was like 5 feet 2. She turned around and looked at me like I was an idiot and then I started to go down fast. I am 6 feet tall and fell over like a tree face first right into this lady's giant boobs, bounced off her and hit my head on the floor. Woke up 2 minutes later in the back of the doctor's office. On the way out I made eye contact with my motorboatee. She was not amused. At least you weren't driving when this happened. My most embarrassing doctor's office story took place with a good ol' OBGYN. While in the waiting room, I realized that I was moist, not due to period, just spontaneous moisture. For the guys, it's like getting a random erection. Sometimes it just happens for no reason. Oh frick, oh frick, oh frick. I'm thinking, hoping that somehow it'll disappear before the full exam. Come time for the pelvic exam, I get my feet in the stirrups and whatnot. As is often the case, the doctor was in the room along with an assistant, both female. Usually, the doctor will lube up the speculum prior to the cervical exam, pap smear etc. When the doctor got the speculum out, her assistant retrieved the lubricant. Then doctor turned to her and said, "Looks like we won't be needing that." TLDR. Lady OBGYN probably thought I was turned on by pelvic exam. My doctor wanted to check me for polyps in my colon. He used a proctoscope, which they used to pump your colon full of air and then look up your butthole. Doc proceeds to pump air up my butt, and it starts to gurgle like a huge fart coming. I giggled about it, not really thinking about the fact that I had this guy looking up my butt. He finished, and I went to the bathroom to wipe all the lube off my butt, not really thinking about the fact that there was lube up my butt, and there was still air trapped up my butt. I walked through the waiting room to leave. About halfway across the waiting room, it got ugly. I ripped this massive, wet fart that sounded like I'd just crapped my pants. I'm not sure who was more horrified, me or the people in the waiting room. Should have told them it was the dog, man. Hi, I've got a classic. So I had this rancid throat infection, as in the back of my throat looked like it had been the star of a bukkake. It was horrific. After a week of being miserable I went to the doctors to get it checked out. Now I have never had a hot doctor before, but the one I got was this lovely mid-late 30s blonde. Very lovely. It comes to the point where she has to take a swab of the back of my throat and she says, "I'm afraid this will make you gag." Now I remember the thing my housemate had told me, that if you squeeze your left thumb in your left hand really tight it removes your gag reflex. So I proclaim this to her, and to her disbelief go on to prove it works. Lo and behold, I don't gag. She says, "Wow, where did you learn that?" To which I obviously say, "Oh, some guy showed me." She raised an eyebrow. I went bright red and that was it for talking. TLDR made a hot doctor think I'm a deep throating champion. When I was 21, I noticed a lump in my right breast. Being a broke college student, I ignored it for a while, and finally got it looked at while visiting home for winter break. I had never been to this doctor before, but she conducted what seemed like a normal examination, remarking that it was really unusual for someone my age to have a solid feeling lump. She apparently wanted some consensus before she sent me for more testing, so she called in another doctor. Fine. This guy says, "Hello, I'm Dr. so and so, and this is my resident, and these are my medical students." Great. So I got to spend the next few minutes, felt like an eternity, in a tiny examination room, laying on a table in only my underpants and socks, with 5 or 6, can't even remember now, other people, who all take turns palpating my breasts and going, hum, mortifying. TLDR. Everybody touched my boobs. Just so you know, you have the right to not be examined by students. You could have kicked them out. When I was in college I went to the on-campus doctor's office to get a physical. Apparently the one in my records was outdated. I had no idea what I was walking into, and it didn't even cross my mind that it was going to be a full pants down examination. To make a long story short, the doctor was a beautiful 28-year-old blonde who was just out of med school or something. After she performed all the different checks-ups, a male nurse entered the room and she commented that he needed to be there for liability purposes. I was confused for a brief second until I was told to drop my pants. She was on her little wheelie stool thing with her beautiful face eye level and inches away from my junk. I closed my eyes while she touched my balls and shaft, trying my best to imagine she was a wrinkly old dude so I wouldn't embarrass myself. Unluckily for me, she grabbed the base of my shaft for some test and I let out a loud, very audible moan. I went red and she acknowledged my moan by giggling. It's okay. Nothing surprises me anymore. I just stood there, shaking my head no in silence, red-faced, and accepting my shame. TLDR. Went to get a physical. Ended up experiencing firsthand the closest thing to the start of a cheesy porno. I kind of hate everyone in this post who's gotten their physicals from hot nurses. My balls were palpated by a 60-year-old, graying, Asian woman. Count your blessings. A couple years back, I had to get a physical for work. Ended up seeing an incredibly hot young nurse practitioner. I was 19 at the time. She was probably 25-ish. As it got time to turn my head and cough, so to speak, she sat down, face level with my waist, and I immediately knew that within seconds I was going to have a raging clue. So I'm standing there, hoping she'll hurry, already blushing furiously, and she takes this moment to look up, currently holding my balls, and commence the standard medical practitioner's small talk routine. Are you in school? What for? You follow the fillies. By the time Dr. Q&A was finished, she looked back down to be greeted by a tremendous, throbbing erection. She laughed a little and said, "Oh look, he likes me," and then moved on with the physical. TLDR. Got physical from hot nurse practitioner. Popped a Titanic boner. Had said boner acknowledged and allowed myself to hope. For one moment I had been transported to P dimension, where hot successful adult females are attracted to 19-year-old scumbags. This was not the case. Received blue balls of a lifetime. At least she was cool about it. This one time I was pooping some blood, so I went to a clinic. The 80-year-old, hunched over, male German doctor had to have a feel around in my business. I'm a girl, FWIW. While this frighteningly decrepit gent was up to his knuckles in my ass, he loudly started asking me about riding back doors. I was shy and 17 at the time. I said, no I do not ride back doors, and laughed nervously. He told me that he couldn't find anything wrong, gave me something for the pain, etc. While I was walking out, through the clinic, past all the other patients who were waiting their turn, he loudly said, "You shouldn't laugh about riding back doors that way. Many young women find they enjoy it. When you try it, though, be safe and use lots of lubricant." I skedaddled my bloody butt out of there right quick. Not a lot of stories begin with this one time I was pooping some blood. So I'm at the OBGYN. I'm 19 and this is the first time I've ever gone to a doctor by myself. They put me in the first room next to the bathroom and we do the checkup stuff, and my doctor asks for a urine sample. She says, "Go next door to the bathroom and then write your name on the sample and put it in the little window." I'm extremely nervous because I usually cannot pee on command. Somehow I managed to pee a little into the stupid cup. I write my name on it and then I realize I have no freaking idea what to do with this cup. I look around the small bathroom and all I see is a silver cabinet and a sink. I walk out the bathroom with this pee cup and bump into this young pregnant woman. I look into her eyes and say, "I peed in this cup." She looks confused. "Do you know what I'm supposed to do with this pee cup?" She stares at me a bit more, then her boyfriend walks up and says, "There's a place for you to put it in the bathroom." I turn bright red and say "Oh," and run back to the bathroom and open the silver cabinet and place it next to all the other freaking pee cups. I walk out the bathroom, avoid eye contact with the pregnant couple, and walk back to my room. I open the door and there's this pantsless black woman. I say, "Oh, sorry, I'm looking for my stuff. I thought this was my room." To which she replies, "What the frick?" So I shut the door and the nurse is standing at the end of the hallway looking at me. "This is your room. Sorry about that. We moved you and I didn't catch you in time." The pregnant couple and the nurse laughed at me while I did my walk of shame out of there. Every part of that was incredibly awkward. I once had a gastroenterologist examine me for hemorrhoids and fissures. While he was probing and looking, he asked, "Are you a gay?" I replied, "I guess I am now." I think I made the situation more uncomfortable for the both of us. I had a friend who knocked over his urine sample onto the doctor's files. A year later, the same guy had to get a rectal exam and giggled like a little girl. Back in 6th grade, I had to get a physical, and during the turn your head and cough bit I giggled. I was so ashamed I didn't look at my balls for a month. A couple years ago I had to go to the health department's gyno since at the time I didn't have health insurance. Well, I requested a female doctor just to be more comfortable and all was going quite well until she asked if a student doctor could come in the room as well. I said yes, not even thinking about it, and in walks this amazingly handsome man while my legs are held wide open. I have never been so mortified in my life. My instant reaction was to snap close my legs while forgetting that my doctor was in between them. Yay, it sucked. I was 12 or so, and my doctor knew I didn't like needles. Still don't, but oh well. So he put a shot that I had to get in his pocket with his pens, so I didn't notice. In the middle of a sentence he pulls it out and comes at me, and I punched him directly in the face and broke his glasses. It wasn't intentional, per se. Dude was coming at me with a sharp object. It was instinct. He ended up grabbing me by the shoulders, pinning me down, and doing the injection. For years afterwards I couldn't face him. TLDR. Punched my doctor in the face. Comma in his pocket with his pens. Read that as dongs and was really confused for a moment. Not my story but a friend in med school. He was working in the clinic one day and went in to see a patient who needed a breast exam. Keep in mind it was a mid-aged but attractive patient. While performing the exam, there was a nurse chaperone. He said yes, very excellent. I mean normal, very normal. He was beet red the rest of the day. Alas, he was not hit but very embarrassed. That's a bit of an overreaction. It's only embarrassing. Nothing to get attacked over. For a while when I would poop I would faint. When I told my doctor he responded, "Oh wow, that's really embarrassing. Hold on, I have to tell Barry this." Hadn't seen my doctor in over a year and he met me outside the examination room before I went in. He spread his arms and I was a little surprised, but started to move in for a hug before he stepped back a little and made a clearer indication that he was just politely gesturing me to enter the room before him. Sheep-faced, I put my head down and marched into the room. When I was 18 I went to Peru for a missions trip so we could bring the word of God to all the ignorant savages. Blah blah blah. While swimming in the Amazon, a parasite became a warm and cozy stowaway in my foot. Good times. Fast forward 3 weeks. I'm back in the States and have incredible stabbing pain in my stomach and have track marks all over my stomach. So I head into my family practitioner to see what the frick is up. She doesn't know what the frick is up and recommends me to the university parasite specialist. This parasite specialist thinks my stomach is the coolest thing he has ever seen. I'm sitting in a goddamn hospital gown and he can't stop talking about how amazing this is. In fact, it's so goddamn amazing that he calls his colleague and who then calls his colleague in. Now, because this is a university hospital, every doctor has a couple interns hanging around and learning. All in all there are 8-10 people in the room checking me out, including some very attractive women very close to my own age. Smart but bearded doctor, not the specialist. We should probably look at his anus. I turn over, hear the snapping of rubber gloves, feel my butt spread apart. Smart but bearded doctor, disappointed. Oh, we won't be able to see anything down there. Too much hair. TLDR. Got worms. Embarrassed by spreading my hairy butt in front of hot interns. Could be worse. You could have had a fish swim up your urethra. Wasn't embarrassing for me, but more awkward hilarious. I was sitting in the waiting room of my OBGYN, girl parts doctor, with about 20 other patients waiting to be seen. It's dead quiet in there except for one girl is on her phone, probably in her late 20s, talking to I can only assume is a close friend. Her one-sided conversation went like this. I'm at the VAJ doctor right now. Yes, she called it that. Getting my crap checked out. Pause. I don't know what the hell's wrong. Dat crap is ripe. Smells like mama stuff to catfish down there. Pause. Yeah. There be rainbows left in my panties. For reals. Green, blue, and red laughter and another brief pause of him. Shit. I can't talk about him right now. Girl, I be in a waiting room full of people. She was white as white can be, and totally made me gag on her crassness and stupidity. Comma, she was white as white can be. Twist of the fricking century right here. I had to get a colposcopy, where they stick a camera up your vag, with the male geno, his nurse, and an intern. It hurt like a bee when they did the swab and the biopsy ripped a chunk out of me. I was so mortified afterwards that when he was done his little talk in the end about cancer and cells and scary crap like that, I said, thanks for sticking things in my glory hole, and burst into tears. TLDR, I'm a wussy. I cried before my colposcopy. The assistant asked if I was experiencing bleeding during intercourse. I was just dumped, so all I could think was no one wants to have intercourse with me. You have been spotted by the money pigeon. Comment gimme gimme and he will bless you with good fortune. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.